Well, shooters and reloaders out there, it's Fortune Cookie 45 LC coming to you from the hot lead zone. And today we're going to discuss some must-have rifle powders for new shooters and reloaders. Because even though we've got a powder shortage, there might be some supplies that'll surface either on the new market or the used market for a new shooter reloader. And if they run into a powder, would that be a good powder for them to really try hard to get? Well, we're going to talk about powders that they can really use and would be a high priority to acquire. Well, first of all, we have to talk about strategy. And that is, you don't know when you're going to run into some deal where you might be able to get some powder or primers. So the only way you can pounce is if you got something to pounce with. So I recommend that all of us have some funds set aside that's been earmarked for acquisition of powder or primers or reloading equipment, that kind of thing. So you'll need anywhere from $50 to $200 in your account that's budgeted just for this kind of thing. And when you know you've got that, then you're ready to pounce at a moment's notice. Well, also a big hello to all the Three Circles passengers and members out there. We're going to start this video by getting warmed up with these reloading trays, just like the video we did on handgun powders. So have a look at this. Well, as you know, we made this tray, the Fortune Cookie 45 LC design for 30-06, 308, 45 ACP, 38 Special, 357 Magnum, but it also includes dies that'll go in these holes and a 75 round block. But we've already discussed this one. Let me show you my latest one, and that's this one right here. This one is a more simplified model of the last one. It just has the holes for 308, 30-06, the 38 Special, 357 Magnum, all the 243s, the 260 Remingtons, 7mm 08, all that kind of thing. And it's simple because it makes use of an oak board and another oak board for a base where the cases go down and hit the bottom base, because these holes are drilled all the way through. And you see, there we go. But we'll do a more in-depth on this. At any rate, let's go ahead, and now that we're all warmed up, let's go to our video on the powders for rifles that we really need to get. Well, first of all these containers are empty, as you see. But let's begin with this one here. And this is IMR or Hodgdon 4895. Now, the history on this is that back in the 1930s, around 1936, when the M1 Garand rifle was being accepted by the U.S. Army, the powder was also being developed at that time for the U.S. 30 caliber 30-06 round, of which the M1 Garand was going to be firing. And that's where 4895 came in. It was developed in the 1930s. Now, it was important that this powder have a medium burn rate. Compared to all the powders we have today, we consider this a medium burn rate, because if the powder created pressure too quickly or too slowly, it wouldn't function the M1 Garand. On one end, if it had too much pressure too early, it would cause damage to the action, especially the long operating rod. As you know, the M16 or AR-15 doesn't have an operating rod. It just goes ahead direct impingement, so it's a lot less sensitive to powder pressure. But the Garand with the long operating rod had problems if the powder speed wasn't right. This was the right speed. If it was too slow a powder, the action wouldn't function. So this powder turned out to be, because of the medium speed, it became one of the most versatile powders ever to be used by reloaders, even to this day. And what happened was, Bruce Hodgdon, who's the founder of Hodgdon Powder Company, he remembered what happened in World War I, where the war ended when they had a pandemic at that time, and the war ended. And what the U.S. government did was they had all this surplus powder, corrosive powder in those days, but they had all that powder on their hands that they were manufacturing for the war effort. And when the war ended so abruptly, instead of storing that and spending money to inventory and logistically handle all that powder they just burned it. And Bruce Hodgson knew that when World War II ended, they were going to do the same thing and burn up huge supplies of smokeless gunpowder. And he knew that all those boys that were coming back from the front, they'd been used to operating all their weaponry and all the great equipment they had, and they were going to be wanting to do a lot of shooting. And so he went to the government and said, well, don't burn it all. I'll buy a bunch of it from you, and that way you can get some revenue for it. That's a great idea, isn't it? So he bought boxcars of .4895 powder, and he wound up distributing it in big lots, big containers, cartons, and it would go to various distributors, and reloaders would go buy it. And what they would do is they would scoop out and sell the powder by the scoop, put it into a paper bag, and that's how they sold .4895. And that gave the start to Bruce Hodgson for a powder empire. At any rate, what happened is that the supplies of .4895, what they call Hodgson .4895, what happened was the supplies that were surplus from World War II ran out. So around 1962 was when Hodgson and the DuPont IMR company wound up actually producing new lots of .4895 because it was a good powder in demand. So they actually started manufacturing this powder for reloaders under the Hodgson .4895 and IMR, Improved Military Rifle .4895. And that's the powders that we have all the way to this day. And being a medium burning powder that was very well behaved, it can be used to load anything from 17 Remington all the way to 460 Weatherby. No, you can't load 50 BMG with this. So if you get a chance to get some IMR or Hodgson .4895, jump at it, because this is a very versatile powder. Anything you load in the way of rifle, you can find load data for .4895 for that caliber that you're trying to load. So this is a good one to get. Now in the same vein, this container actually has some .4064 in it. And what I did was I had gotten a bigger container of it, and I wanted to put some into a smaller container. So what I went ahead and did was took a accurate empty container, and I went ahead and wiped out the identification of what the powder was and substituted .4064 IMR in this container. And it's got about, maybe a third left in here. So when it gets empty, I'll take the bigger container, which is also half empty, go ahead and fill it with another pound of this powder. But IMR .4064 is another powder that's very similar to .4895. It's a medium fast burning powder, very useful for a lot of our rifle calibers. This powder was also developed in the 1930s, and it might have been a competition for .4895. At any rate, the contract went to .4895, and .4064 was never used in military. It wound up being a very popular powder for reloaders because, again, you can load anything from 17 Remington all the way to 458 Winchester Magnum, 460 Weatherby. This powder is known for its consistency and accuracy, so we like .4064 IMR. You get a chance to get any .4064, you can't go wrong latching onto some of this. Now, one thing about .4895 powder is the grain sizes are on the small side so that it functions very nicely through powder measures. Now IMR 4064 does have the problem in that it's an extruded powder with a kind of a loggy look to it, so that sometimes if you try and use it through a powder measure, it may not meter as well as you would like. Now both of these powders are very well known for their accuracy, but 4064 has a problem in that it doesn't meter as well through powder measures. Now that's not a problem if you go ahead and drop the charge into a scale pan and then go ahead and trickle up. With 4895, the thing about this powder is that the granule sizes are small, so that it meters very well through a powder measure. If you like easy metering, 4895 is the one for you, but you can't go wrong with either one of these powders. They're great for any rifle shooter reloader to have. Now, back in 1968, Winchester came out with one of their ball powders, and this is little spherical powders that are flattened a little bit. So this powder, Winchester 748, was very easy to meter in a powder measure, but it also exhibited all the characteristics of ball powders that you've heard about. That is, that it's got a high loading density, so that it all packs down into the case and there's a lot of powder for the space that's in there. Low barrel erosion, which is part of the reason for the ball powders. Clean burning, low flash. So it was intended to be a very good military powder in 1968. But this powder turned out to be a very good powder for reloaders. Still in the medium burn characteristics that places it so that it can load everything down to 17 caliber all the way to 458 Winchester Magnum. And this powder is a very good one for you to use if you are a reloader that runs into some of this. It wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and get this powder. Now the last rifle powder we're going to entertain here is Hodgdon Vargas. And it's a hard powder to get, even during times when powder availability is there, because this is so popular a powder. And it's made for precision, accuracy. It has low temperature sensitivity. It was actually one of the powders that Hodgdon, back in 1996, introduced Vargas as the first one of all of their extreme powders that were coming out after that. And this one was very successful. It's made in Australia. It's a great powder for 223, which again, all these powders are good for 223. That's one of the criteria for a powder that we have to have. But it'll load everything all the way to 458 Winchester Magnum. I know that because I have one of those, and I like to use Vargas. It's one of the reasons why this can's empty. And got another can, but you know what? If I had a chance to get more Vargas, I would jump at it. So this powder is great for shooting accuracy, precision, long range, all of that kind of thing. The temperature sensitivity being so low makes this powder even more coveted by reloaders. Now Vargas is a kind of an extruded powder, but it's got small, short grains. So it's one of the first shortcut powders. As such, it meters very well through powder measures, although we would like to go ahead and weigh the charges for maximum precision. Well, shooters and reloaders out there, in order to be complete, we've got to consider discussion of black powder substitutes. Now, if you get a chance to get some black powder, and that's hard to get a hold of, and you happen to shoot black powder already, well, of course, get some black powder. But for all of you new shooters and reloaders out there who haven't considered black powder, consider the black powder substitutes. I'm not talking about Pyrodex. Pyrodex was developed in 1975 by Hodgdon Powder Company. And what they did was they took black powder and added stuff to it, like chemicals, potassium perchlorate and other chemicals, graphite. And by adding all that in there, they changed it so that it was a black powder substitute that could be used instead of black powder, but essentially it was black powder. And you still had all the problems of fouling and all that kind of thing, but it was more stable and safer to use, and that's why Pyrodex came in. But about 20 years ago, Hodgdon came out with another black powder substitute, and it's called 777. And the beauty of this is that they got rid of the sulfur that's in black powder, so you don't get the sulfur odors and you don't get the sulfur fouling, this kind of thing. And they got rid of the charcoal. The charcoal is the fuel. The oxidizer is potassium nitrate. So that's still in there. But they got rid of the charcoal, and instead the fuel that they used is sugar-based. So it's carbon that's in sugar used to burn, with the oxidizer being potassium nitrate and no sulfur. And this created a black powder substitute that's actually a fairly clean shooting formula. And I've used this in cartridge cases, especially good for straight wall cases like the 45-70, 38-55, all of your pistol calibers, that revolver calibers that are straight wall. Probably not good for automatic pistols. But 777 is a good powder substitute if you get a chance to get some 777, whether it's a 3FG or the 2FG. Either one, you can use it in cartridges. Now, however, I would be remiss to not let all of you out there know that with 777, an excellent powder, but you cannot quite use it like smokeless powder. It's not a straight transference in techniques, because if you have any airspace in your cartridge between the powder and the bullet, that is a no-no. Just like black powder and black powder substitutes, 777 needs to be loaded so that the bullet will touch the powder charge, or very slight 5% compression. You don't want to compress it heavily, like you see all those old Civil War movies where they're ramming that ball down on top of the powder in their muskets, is ramming it down there. You don't do that kind of compression with 777. A little bit's okay. But if you do that and no airspace between the bullet and powder charge, you're going to be on real good ground with 777. I found that it shoots with great satisfaction when you do it that way. And that limits you on the power factors that are in your load, but the power factors that you get with 777 are very useful. But if you're able to score some of this, and you've never used it before, there's some good videos out there. I've done a couple myself that involve the reloading with Hodgdon 777. You might want to refer to those. And you'll get some good performance, enough that you can actually shoot and have credible performance out of your ammunition. So if you get a chance to stumble onto supplies of 777, by all means, you ought to consider going ahead and getting it. So, shooters and reloaders and 3 Circles passengers and members, here's a good stable of powders for all of you new shooters and reloaders out there looking for good, versatile powders that can be used to reload a wide range of rifle cartridges. Take care. Good reloading to you. Good hunting for powder. We'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.